Hello, sheeple. Look, I'm going to shoot this for about the 10th time because couldn't get the audio to work and I keep on screwing it up. So, I don't even know how to do editing yet, but you can work with me because together we can learn something. And if anybody knows more about the world and how the world works and what's going on, I'd love to hear it. Please let me know. I've upgraded a tiny bit, got a PowerPoint. That's going to work a lot better than the notes I had that I had a lot of difficulty with. And it's going to make sure I don't miss any important points. So, how about we start tonight's topic? So, tonight I'd like to express some concerns over the media coverage of the war in Ukraine and all this propaganda. And this is going to be mainly from an Australian perspective because that's where I am. I'm confident that, of course, the propaganda is going to be just as disgraceful wherever you are because even if you're in Russia, then it's going to be the same thing, but pretty much in reverse. Now, the immediate concern that I have with this propaganda is that it just seems ludicrously black and white. I mean, it's just infantile. It's as if it's aimed at children. I mean, it just seems to be. According to the Australian media, anyway, and I think in most places in the world, it's evil, cowardly Russians wanting to bomb the crap out of innocent, brave Ukrainians who just want to live in peace. Of course, this propaganda is just infantile, and it's hard to understand why a lot of clever adults are accepting this. I mean, some Australians have been evoked to such an extent that they either want to join the fight against the Russians, or at least go all the way over there to Ukraine and drop off supplies. The ones that have actually done this are portrayed as passionate and as heroes. Any dissenting voices face reprimand from the government's media or brainwashed sheeple. An Russian Australian who was on ABC's Q&A, which is a political debate program, was ordered out by the presenter Stan Grant for expressing an alternative view. I mean, not completely to the size of the Russians, but just want to say, it's pretty much what I'm saying. It's not that black and white. There is a side. The Russians have they have their side to the story. This was live on air, and I'm not 100% sure if Stan Grant was wallowing in self-righteousness with a sickening lecture that he gave, or embarrassingly following orders that enforce an agenda that eradicates free speech. Q&A, this program, is exactly where this kind of debate is supposed to take place. Censorship is becoming insufferable and frighteningly more and more acceptable. You can be jailed for a Facebook post these days. I know I get pretty nervous when I write something that may be a little bit too controversial. Us sheeple are not allowed to go against the state. Enforcement of this is becoming stronger and stronger, and we're of course not doing anything about it. I mean, we hate the suffering of those in Ukraine, but you've got to think, where was our compassion re the suffering in Afghanistan or Iraq or Libya or Kosovo or Syria or Yemen or Yugoslavia, Panama, and many more countries than this? And who cared then? I mean, what about the abject, eternal poverty and exploitation in the third world. I mean, I see that they get thrown the odd sandwich by some random charity, but where's our moral outrage? I mean, this has been going on forever. The USA, especially, have given hundreds of millions to perpetuate this war in Ukraine. USA have bought so many weapons to blow up the Russians. I don't see the difference between American troops being on the ground in Ukraine or not. Come to think of those hundreds of millions in this one war, which wasn't even the biggest, it wasn't even the worst. Hundreds of millions into that. Imagine how many gazillions and gazillions of dollars are spent on all these wars that have been going on forever. And when it comes to suffering and starvation and desperation and despair and this just disgusting abject poverty, I mean, there's enough money that's gone into war to end this 100 times over, 1,000 times over, but it doesn't happen because that's not the intention of the ruling elites, and us sheeple are allowing it to happen. We're not going to do anything. A heavy subject, but let's try and be light-hearted, because what can we do unless together we all get together, we cooperate? Non-compliance. But this is a bigger subject. I'll try not to digress too much. Let's stick with the war on Ukraine. On Wall Street, some of the money seems to be reclaimed in a sense, by there's a lot of big companies, enormous companies, and they're making a mint out of the suffering in Ukraine that they're supposed to be caring about. They're making a fortune off them, or off this suffering in Ukraine. And this is whilst me and you, the little people, the sheeple, we suffer inflation and shortages. And there's going to be elections soon here in Australia, and I can guarantee that after the election, inflation is going to go through the roof. It's going to get pretty horrible, and there's going to be more shortages, more disruptions to the food chain, gas prices. The price of everything is going up. It's going to be insane. I mean, does your media tell you all this? Does it make it clear? Does it tell the truth? Because there's certainly none of realistic, honest coverage of this in Australia. Most people only care about the Ukraine because their TV told them to. The TV has told us to be passionate and outraged by suffering in Ukraine, and hateful of any dissenters, whilst not giving a crap about many other far worse conflicts and injustices. Passion and compassion are some of the greatest qualities that make us human. How are these beautiful qualities being switched on and off by the TV? And the TV switches us on and off more than the other way round. Absurd, but that really is the case. I'll explain how it actually does this. And I said earlier that I didn't understand why very clever people, cleverer than me, cleverer than you, but they're falling for this infantile, ludicrous propaganda. But I think I may have at least one of the answers, one of the reasons for this. Radiation and flicker rates from the TV and many other electronic devices can be controlled and used to manipulate and influence our moods and suggest ideas to our subconscious. This is old technology, and there are actual patents for this. This technology would be very advanced by now, but we're not going to hear much about it, of course, because they're not going to tell us. They want to use it surreptitiously to help control us. This is just one of the many reasons why very clever people are just absolutely unable to receive information that differs from the mainstream narratives. they are programmed to dismiss it. Don't know that they're doing. It's all happening subconsciously. This is made very apparent, really blatant New World Order agenda behind the COVID-19 nonsense, behind this war in Ukraine, and behind the climate change fraud. I mean, you just got to look at something like chemtrails. I mean, they're being blasted all over our skies on some massive, bizarre, worldwide agenda plan, and nobody seems to care. Too busy, just don't care. Too preoccupied, struggling in the rat race. I mean, every single one of us sheeple should demand that our governments do not spray another one of these things until we know exactly what those things are, what they contain, and what the agenda is behind this. I mean, I hear it's there's some very nasty chemicals in there: barium, strontium, aluminium, ton of other chemicals. Who knows? I mean, it looks like different compounds if you really study them. Sometimes people have gone in depth. I won't try not to get too distracted, but I mean, how are people ignoring this? I mean, how are we not stopping the government from doing this, or getting them to at least explain everything? That's us sheeple for you, I guess. Anyway, it's back to the war in Ukraine. I guess the TV doesn't tell us to care about those, so we don't. This propaganda is at every stage in our life, and coupled with perception-altering frequencies, poor physical health, and the struggle in the rat race, the struggle just to pay our bills. We barely need a chip implanted into our brains to control us when we're being controlled without that. So, what's actually going on in Ukraine? Well, I'm afraid I've got more questions than answers, maybe a few small insights. I mean, we need to ask, why have we been manipulated into caring about this over other conflicts? I mean, have no doubt that somehow this will bring us closer to a one world government of total enslavement. Were Western Ukrainian Nazis killing Eastern Ukrainians? I mean, USA and Ukraine were the only ones that voted against a Russian resolution against racism, Nazism, xenophobia, and I think this was in 2016. Now, Russia probably had an ulterior motives for this resolution, but there's a complicated history here, again, that we don't know anything about, that we don't question. The real war, and I think Ukraine is just a stepping stone. The real war is between Russia and China up against USA and all its allies. And non-participation in this war is not an option unless us sheeple finally refuse to comply with our governments, who in turn answer to the evil elites that I'm always talking about. Also, what's with NATO installing a puppet government in Ukraine, which would mean Ukraine was already pretty much taken over by the USA? Was Ukraine living off of loans from the IMF, which means it was probably controlled by them as well? Was there US-run biolabs being used for nefarious purposes? How can we trust NATO, especially USA, who have murdered more people than Russia ever has, and I'm pretty confident ever will? USA just ousted Imran Khan, a Prime Minister of Pakistan, for not siding with them against Russia. I mean, America had no right to do this, but they had the power to do this. seem to have the power to bash, which they use, to have the power to bash any supposedly sovereign state that won't take their orders. It's going to take a cleverer and more informed person than me to find the 100% truth, the correct answers behind all these questions, but at least we know we've got to bring up these questions, and we've got to demand our governments, our mainstream media, to tell us the truth. And if they're not going to tell us the truth, then we're not going to comply with anything they say. We can be confident that Zelensky in Ukraine and Putin in Russia are going to be ultimately controlled by the same ruling elites that I'm always talking about, that I'll probably bore you to death about, but they're always going to be there, so I'll always be talking about them. Before I close, got a bit of a sensitive subject, especially if you're a soldier or very patriotic or whatever. But I think it's important that I say it, and you're welcome to agree to differ, respectfully. I have to say that now it should be very clear that no citizen of any country in the world, especially the West, should even consider joining their armed forces and harming any other citizen in the world on behalf of their evil and deceitful governments. Fighting for your country is not honourable, it's abhorrent. Yes, I understand, the old days, and what I hear from so many people that, let's go and fight for our country. It's the right thing to do. We're heroes. We're patriotic. We've got to defend ourselves. And, when you face strife, you do have to defend yourself. All you end up doing is killing other citizens in another country that are just as decent as you are. And the ruling elites are cashing in, shaping the world with the wars that we die and suffer for, and it's just part of a plan. It's just a game. We absolutely can't do that. There's no excuse. We know that now. It's crystal clear. It's crystal clear. All governments are absolutely corrupted and under the control of genocidal maniacs. Citizens, sheeple of the world must learn to live without these enormously powerful ruling bodies. To our rulers, we the sheeple will no longer comply. The moonlight fades with the morning glow. Goodbye, sheeple.